Okay, so the recording has started. So just as a reminder, obviously we're recording. The recording will be available on the Grafana YouTube channel after this call. And if you have questions, you can add them to the chat. You can raise your hand. And if you don't want to appear on the recording, please feel free to not share video or join with a name that is not your actual name, just out of respect for privacy. So go. There we go. All right, welcome to our community call. The Grafana Labs community call is the third Thursday of every month. So we have one coming up in another 4 weeks. We rotate different squads and themes and features. So always something interesting to check out from the team. And this week, or this month rather, we're going to be here with the user experience team, which is us. In terms of agenda, we're going to just kind of talk about a few of our current projects. And when we say current, it's interesting because for UX, current is actually kind of like future. The things that we're working on are things that are quite necessarily available yet, but they are either things that are in planning or things that maybe are ideas that might not come to fruition, or they might, depending on kind of how it goes as we build and how it goes as we research and test our ideas. So we're going to talk about our new navigation, the query builder patterns, logs explorer, and then have some time for questions. Before I keep going, I just want to pause because I see the video cutting out a bit. Is my connection okay? Can everyone still hear me all right? Okay, cool. Thank you. I don't know what it's doing, so we'll just keep going. So our presenters today are me, Amy Super. We have Niet Hogdu and Diego Adams. Those are our Slack handles on Grafana Community Slack, so you can reach us there as well. If you think of something after the call, or if you are just kind of interested in participating in any of our research, or just want to say hi. So since I'm introducing, I'm just going to keep going. One of the things I've been working on for most of this year actually is a new navigation for Grafana. And that's sort of like a really broad term. So to kind of narrow it down, we have two things that we're really focusing on with the new navigation. One is our information architecture. And so what is information architecture? In short, it's really how you organize and label content within an application or within a website. And what we have found is that as we're growing, our information architecture needs are also growing and evolving. So we're finding that people, especially newer users who aren't kind of used to where things are getting lost, or they get stuck. So that it's like, how do I get back to where I came from? Or maybe can't find what they're looking for. And as we continue to add new features and new functionality to Grafana, one of the things that we want to make sure is that people can actually find this new stuff and use it. And so we need to make sure that our information architecture supports not just the things we're adding, but how people want to interact with the system. So in short, we can't just keep adding icons on the left-hand navigation bar, which is what we've kind of done to date. So, what information architecture tends to be a kind of research-heavy discipline within user experience. So in March, we conducted a card sorting study where we had users from our community, and then also users who have cloud and enterprise accounts kind of do what we call a card sorting exercise, where you sort of group concepts or features together and tell us sort of like, what things do you use together that maybe should go together in our organization? And then we developed 2 information architecture proposals. And we really talked with our stakeholders a lot for these proposals, because we need to not just support how people want to use Grafana, but we also want to support our plans for the future. So it's sort of like, if you think about building a house, you don't want to build a house with 1 bedroom when you're planning to have 7 kids. So, I mean, maybe that's sort of an extreme example, but I think it gives you an idea of how we want to keep scaling for the future, but not with 7 kids. Then we did a test called a tree test. And so what that is that it's, again, a research methodology where we have people try out these proposals. So try this out and see if they can find the things we ask them to look for. So at this point, we now have kind of what I call a winning proposal. It's in air quotes because, there's still, tweaks and modifications happening. And right now we're actually planning the implementation of that. And I'll give a little sneak peek preview of some of it when I'm finished with my slides. So I mentioned before that we think about navigation in two ways. So we think about it in terms of the information architecture, but we also think about it in terms of the user interface. So, you know, much like with the IA, we're seeing that our actual navigation UI elements can be inconsistent. The breadcrumbs, sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they work in one way, sometimes they work in a different way. We have flyout elements that sort of hide content. And to have a new information architecture, we actually needed to kind of build a UI that would support that new IA. And so we're shifting to a navigation header, which there's an image of at the top of the slide, and a menu that's accessed via the hamburger icon, and breadcrumbs for every page, so that no matter where you are, you can always figure out how to get back to where you came, not necessarily where you came from, but back to sort of a higher level of the organization. And then we're adding this additional level of navigation. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So this is today, and this is my cloud account. So this is going to be both for Grafana Cloud and for Grafana Open Source, as well as Enterprise. And so what you can see when I mentioned we can't just keep adding icons, you can see on my monitor here that, like, you know, we really would only have room for one more if we keep going the way that we have been. So that's what I mean when I'm mentioning that we're sort of running out of room at this top level. In terms of obscuring content, these flyouts, you know, like if I want to interact with this panel and this flyout is kind of over it, it's just sort of annoying that, you know, you're kind of running into things that way. And then when I mentioned that sometimes breadcrumbs work one way and sometimes they work a different way, so the breadcrumbs for the dashboard actually work as a search box, but I can use general, and it doesn't go to general, it actually opens the search box in the general folder. Yet if I were to go and look at, let's take a look at in this area, I don't have breadcrumbs at all. Or if I look at my sort of administration, you can see that again, I don't have breadcrumbs. So we're really trying to kind of unify that. So I'm gonna actually stop sharing and share a different application. Maybe if I can figure out how my share works. All right. So some of the UI elements completely broken down. As I mentioned, there's this header. So we will always have breadcrumbs. We will always have this sort of menu. The Grafana logo takes you home. The breadcrumbs will have, you know, very consistent and clear behavior, which is explained in all of this pink text, which, no worries, it's pretty in the weeds. And then we'll have this ability to sort of show and hide using this caret in the circle. And that way, you know, by adding the header, we're not always taking all your real estate because you can show and hide it. Likewise, in the secondary navigation, you can see that we now have this sort of left-hand navigation that starts to group the content together. This is what it would look like in light mode, minus this drop shadow. It's kind of a mess. And then what does that mean for mobile? So more and more, we're finding that our users are starting to work with Grafana on their phones or on tablets. And so we want to make sure we're supportive of that. So you can see we still have breadcrumbs, but they're only going to go back one level. This second level navigation becomes a drop down. And then this is what sort of the menu would look like fully expanded. In terms of where we are with this today, I'm going to reshare yet again. We have, this is very much work in progress. So, you know, not everything's going to look the way that the designs looked. But again, this is a demo environment. So we can see that when I mentioned that we could, you know, show and hide this nav bar, we would just click here and you can see it minimizes it. So it makes a lot more room for you. We're also looking at, you know, ways, this actually isn't hooked up, you know, different ways of making things full screen. The menu, which today actually you can access via this little chevron here, opens what we sort of half jokingly, but now all the time call mega menu. So in the future, that will be the only menu. So we don't have the left-hand navigation bar anymore. And so we don't have sort of this content being obscured when users hover over things. If we look at a dashboard, for example, so here we have that second level navigation element, so we can very easily move between items. And then when we look at a dashboard and we go to, for example, the settings, you can see that, again, we're kind of modeling after that. And again, this is work in progress. Obviously, the breadcrumbs are not correct here, and that there's no header here, but that's sort of the idea that we are going with overall. So that is actually all I have to demo today. So I just want to pause and see if there are any questions for me or any comments on what I showed.
How's the application plugins look like in your demo? Because you show only the main parts, but there is no application plugins, right?
That is exactly the hardest thing. So that's a great question. So we are working with our plugins platform squad to figure that out. So for Grafana authored plugins, we will decide where they go in the navigation. We're looking at ways for plugin authors to tell Grafana where they should belong in the navigation and in the, not just in the navigation, but in the information architecture. So that is actually the hardest thing and the thing that is kind of work in progress. And so I'm a little fuzzy on describing it right now, but definitely a problem that we're focusing a lot of attention on because it's tricky.
Right. I mean, this is where you started with, right? There are so many of them. You have it in the cloud account, as you said yourself, and
Yes.
now more and more community building this application plugins, and we have 3 or 4 of them as well. Yes. So it will be interesting, I mean, how we should do that. And of course, I mean, the upgrade path is very important when, right, I mean, we have to submit this information. And you have to think that there are many application plugins which was not updated for years, right? How they're going to behave.
Exactly. And so I think that probably by default, what we will end up doing is kind of creating a, you know, this is sort of an idea that we're playing with, but creating kind of a group for everything. But what we've heard from people is that like, well, what if I use Kubernetes and nothing else in Grafana? And so one of the other sort of future state items is to think about how admins might be able to configure this menu for their organization. And so if your organization only uses, you know, like 2 things in Grafana and 1, you know, plugin, 1 application plugin, then like, can we just hide everything else from everybody? And so that's definitely on the table for future state as well.
Okay.
But yeah, great question. And the hardest one.
That was good. I saw that Grafana is working on the top menu, and it's great that you showcased it today. So it's going to be 9.2.0?
I don't think quite yet. So I'm actually not sure exactly what our timeline is in terms of it being available more widely. I think we'll probably start with it being available behind a feature toggle so that people can turn it on and off and try it out and gather feedback and see if we need to iterate anymore. But in terms of actual timing, I'm afraid I don't have a good answer for you on that right now.
Okay.
Okay. So that's it for me for navigation. So I'll let Diego take over to talk about query builders. And Diego, just tell me when to switch slides and I'll do it.
Sure. Awesome. Thanks, Amy. Hey, welcome everyone. Firstly, just apologies for the background. We have this wonderful thing in South Africa called load shedding, where the power just cuts out. So I'll try my best to make my face visible as possible. Cool. So if we can move over to the next slide. Cool. So today I'll be chatting about query patterns, sort of what they are, how they work, what are the sort of improvements that we've worked on. And I think it'll be better if I just kickstart by sharing my screen, because I can just take you through some of the current stuff. So I'm just going to share my screen, Amy. And just shout if you can see your faces or the query builder.
I can see both.
Oh, can you see both, or is that all? Can you see like the main screen?
Oh, no, you know what? I'm seeing my face on my screen. Go ahead, you're fine.
Okay, cool. All right, cool. So this is what we call the query builder. And just to sort of explain what query patterns are, I want you to think of them as in a way that you can kickstart your query. So if you had a query, I'm just going to reference a kitty because Anna's got one over there. So if you had a 1 + 1 kitty equals 2 kitties, what query patterns could do is write the 1 + 1 kitty part for you, and all you would need to do is just write the remaining 2 kitties. So that's a very basic example, but it's just a way, it's just an analogy to help you better understand what they are. If you want to know where they're located, so this is in the low-key query builder. You'll notice the little drop down over here. And these are where we currently house some of our query patterns. We have about 17 patterns with both Loki and Prometheus. And just to give you a live example of how it works, if I select one of these patterns, you can see that it sort of fast tracks the query for me. I can then come in here, select a label filter, and run the query, and voila. So a very nice, simplistic way of just writing queries. There's many different use cases. There's many different patterns that I can use. And it's just a way to speed up writing very, not necessarily complex, but just writing out queries. So what are some of the issues with the current way in which you interact with query patterns? Firstly, the name query patterns was not very known to some users. They didn't feel the connection with that word pattern. They didn't quite understand it. The other thing was there were no descriptions. So whenever you're scrolling through these patterns, there's no way of knowing what they will do or what they are unless you click on one and then you get this sort of view. So it's at a snapshot, you're not getting much information as a user. And one of the other key pieces of feedback was if I've started writing a query, so for example, let's suppose this is a working query, which it is. If I come in here and I change the query, I don't get any sort of message that says, hey, you're about to, replace this query. It just simply replaces it. So that can be quite frustrating if you've spent time maybe not only using query patterns, but writing out a long piece of query, and you just come over here and it changes it for you. So just to address some of these issues, what we've started working on is how we can relook at query patterns, how we can display them. So this is one of the intentions that we built. So as you can see, we've renamed the button to Kickstart Your Query. I'm just going to try and make this a little bit bigger. To kickstart your query. And the key difference now is when I hit kickstart my query, a modal appears and the query patterns are separated by log queries and metrics queries. And immediately from here, I can go into whichever section I want, and I can see a preview of what the query will look like. So just disclaimer, this is dummy queries. They reflect pretty close to real queries, but just so you know up front. I can immediately see a portion, a raw query, what it is. I can browse through them. I can go to metrics query and I can get the same sort of preview. And already this gives me a lot more context before I select a query. From here, I can simply just select one. I can complete my query and I can run it again. So it's just another way of addressing, housing all the queries in one place. There's different scenarios. If you may add different queries, then we can expand on that library as well. If you were to look at the other issue that was at play was what happens if a user has a working query and they want to replace it. So if you can just remember on this view, all you need to do is just come and it would replace your current query with sort of nothing stopping you. In this view, the user has a working query and they would like to explore more query patterns. They'd come on here, click on query patterns. They'd maybe have a list of, I've just shortened this for the example, but they'd maybe have a list of 20 queries. And if they want to use one, because they have an existing query already, they would get this little disclaimer that says, hey, you're about to replace your query with this query pattern. You can either go back, you can either replace it, or you can create a new query. So if the user goes back, they just go back to this view and they can continue on. If they replace it, it would replace the current query with this query pattern. And if they go create new, what it would do, it would leave the original query untouched and just add another query row and a query section. So just a very nice way of addressing the sort of clutter with query patterns. And if we just were to go back to the slide, where are we? Amy, if you wouldn't mind just popping up that Prezi again for me. Sorry. No worries. Awesome. Thank you. Cool. And if we could just move to, I think it's the 2 slides down. Yeah, so just to think about query patterns, we sort of want to think of what the future is with them. And the idea is that eventually we'll have an expanded library where we can host a lot more query patterns. We can list them in that view or maybe have its own view. And then the ultimate goal with query patterns is to have customized patterns. So we've had a lot of feedback from users that want, on an organizational level or on a personal level, they want the ability to create their own queries and use that as they go. So if you're in an organization and you have 5 common queries that you use, you want to be able to sort of preset that so that users can use them on a daily basis. So that's just some of the ideas for the future of query patterns. Do you have any questions just on the current state, what's in development or anything like that?
Diego, I have a question for you. Are you still doing like gathering community feedback, like doing any kind of user testing or user research on this?
Sure. So we've had a combination of different forms of feedback. I've spent some time with some customers, just interviewing them, trying to understand their pain points on the current usage of query patterns, but also gathering from the community. And the main common threads that came up was just the lack of descriptions and not seeing the actual raw query. So seeing that raw query was quite big for a lot of users. And with the descriptions, we've decided that we probably move it into 2 phases, with phase 1 being we'll just display the raw query, and in phase 2, bringing in the actual query descriptions to those query patterns. And hopefully that will engage or make it a little bit more understandable for some users.
All right, thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions? Cool.
All
well,
right.
thank you
Thanks,
very much.
Diego.
Cool.
All right. And now we will have Nihat talk about Logs Explorer. If I could, there we go. Go ahead, Nihat.
Yeah, awesome. Actually, I have one question for Diego. How can the community reach out to you just in case if they want to participate in the user testings?
That's a fabulous question. Thanks, Niet. So we do have our Loki community channel. So you're welcome to go on there. You can reach out to me on my Slack handle. It is in this slide as well. But if you have any feedback or anything, you can reach out on the community channel and I will gladly engage with you and we can take it from there.
Awesome. Cool. All right. So now it's my turn to talk a little bit about Logs Explorer. And I guess I'm just going to give you some insights and behind the scenes and what's going on and what we've been doing so far. So Logs Explorer itself is already a very great feature that many use. But what we heard from user interviews and user testings is that some features are maybe a bit hidden or they want to change it. And as we move forward with Logs Explorer and we're looking into the future, we want to consider the user feedback. So when we reach out, we don't only reach out to paying customers, but also to our community, and we reach out, we read our GitHub issues, right? And we want to reach out to everyone who has feedback for us. So on that note, you can also reach out to me for any Logs Explorer feedback. Yeah, so I want to show you a few little things that we've been working on so far. I would say small feature changes have big impact. And on that note, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. The trouble with sharing the screen. Okay, awesome. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Yep. Okay, perfect. So what I want to talk about is one feature that already exists in Logs Explorer, and that is the show context. So let's say you are in Logs Explorer and you have written your query and you filtered for a log label. Then you can see your filtered labels, and at the end of each label, you can see a button that says show context. The button always appears at the end of a log line, and depending on how long it is, the position varies all the time. And we want to bring in a consistency into the inconsistency that we have currently, just to make it easier for the user to access the show context model. And oh, that's the wrong. Oh. One moment. And I thought nothing would go wrong. Okay. And so here we are. This would be the user interface right here when you are, am I sharing the right one? Let me unshare and reshare. Okay, this is what happens when you, I don't know, I just prepare a note that nothing can go wrong. Here we go again. Okay, and nothing has gone wrong so far. So here's the interface. You can see the log lines. Let's say you filtered for a label. And as I said, at the end of the label, at the end of the log line, the text, you would see the show context button. But we want to bring in a consistency. And so when you hover over a log line, you can see two buttons. Maybe I can, yeah. You can see two buttons. One is the show context button that we already have implemented, but now it's on the right-hand side. And we also implemented a copy button. So what we've seen in our user interviews and testings is that users sometimes go ahead and highlight the whole log line, and that can be sometimes tedious. And we want to make everyone's life easier. So we just implemented, we are going to implement a copy button. And you only have to click on it, and it's one click, and your whole life changes. I hope, at least. And but to come back to the show context button, so you can click on show context, and this is the model that appears. So what the current state of the button, the model that appears is this. So you have the log lines, the previous log lines that you want to see, and the log lines that come after. But there is not much to it. And what we have done is we added a timestamp. And we noticed that the timestamp is always important to the user, especially when looking on logs, because you want to see when the logs came in, right? You don't only want to see what kind of logs, but you want to kind of see like what's happening, what time it is. So this is something that we're going to add. Like I said, small feature changes, but big impact for the user. And continuing, so this is the alt one. We're going to go with this. And something that the users also mentioned is some features are hidden in the back. They are there. The user sometimes doesn't know about it. So I'm going to show you another feature, which is the download of the log lines. So some users said they would like to download. They weren't aware that they can. They can, but it's hidden in the feature. So in the UI, I mean. So you can go to Inspector, you can go to Data, and somewhere hidden here, we have the download buttons. And the request was to make it more visible. And because it made sense to do it for our UI and the use cases, we are going to do something here. We are going to take the download button to the front of the UI based on the user feedback. And now the user can directly with just simple clicks, see it and download it when needed. Yeah. And then one more thing, this is one of my favorites. Like I said, this is small, but also a copy icon. So the users said, and this goes back to filtering. They like to filter, or they have to filter for labels to see a specific log lines. So what they would do is they would open up the log lines, see the labels, and they would want to filter for it. And what they would do is either remember the value, or they would again copy and highlight it, and then take it back to the query to filter for it. And this is actually already implemented, as I've seen earlier. So my team is definitely ahead of me. So I'm going to write them later on and say, good job. So you can already copy this here. So you can click here, copy, it says copied, the user is being notified. You can come up here to the query and say, I want to filter for it. So here we go. And this makes your life a lot easier. And we're filtered for it without any copying, highlighting, anything. And here we are. Actually, that was it. Small changes, like I said, but big impact. And what I also want to mention is, I'm showing small things, but in the background, there are bigger things happening. So there are bigger movements. And I hope in the near future, but definitely in the future, you're going to see a nice transformation. Let me say it like this, nice transformation. So you should go back to Logs Explorer sometimes and just check out what we're doing. Yeah. So thank you. And let's go back to Amy. Oh, do you have any questions? Any questions?
I will take it one step forward. If you can copy, do another button, then you can actually put it like in the search already.
Say it again.
You copy it, then you have it in the clipboard and you update your search query, right? Why not to do another button? When you click the button, it's already in the search query. Like what you did, but in one step.
Yeah, good feedback. Good feedback, and maybe this is something that we're going to do for the future. Maybe we are already working on it. Okay. But yeah, definitely a good one. So what you mean is click on the value, it goes automatically to the query, and you can filter automatically. But
yeah, this is what you did, right? You click the copy, you go to the search and insert it manually. So you can do it with a button.
Yeah.
No,
you can. Yeah, you
could. Take a step forward.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. That's actually good feedback.
Yeah, because this is what you do, right? You see the value, you wanted to add it to the filter, you click on it, it's already filtered. You don't need to copy, do anything manually.
Okay. I have a question for you. So how would you know if, let's say you don't want to necessarily filter the value, but you want to do something else, but when you click on it, it automatically always filters for it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah,
there is the options, right? You can copy, you can add to the filter in different ways as well, right? So
okay,
just make it smart button.
Awesome. Yeah, smart button.
Just an idea.
No, it's good. I'm taking that one. Any more questions? All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, Nihat. I'm going to take sharing back over here. And
yes.
I feel there is always new button somewhere, because it's like now it's everywhere, on the left, on the right, in the middle, on the top. And it's at the point when if you had it with download button, it's kind of too much. So now users have access to everything, but it's too many of them, so you don't know where to click.
Yeah, I feel like that's always one of the trickiest things is, these sort of quality of life improvements, they're sort of shortcuts, but too many shortcuts. They're no longer shortcuts because there are too many of them. We're starting to see that. I know Diego and I have talked about this a lot in the header for the query builders. We have this sort of, I call it the icon parade, because it's just all of these little sort of like record, save, info, there's a copy, there's, you know, so it's just like tick, 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 all these little icons, and they're no longer useful because there's so many of them. And so that's where, you know, this team really appreciates hearing feedback and understanding what are the things that actually are helpful and what are the things that we can kind of like what should we bury and what should we surface. So very helpful for us to hear that.
I think this is the feedback I shared before, like a half a year ago when it was a previous UX meeting, that you have, I mean, when you create the queries, for the different data sources, you have the top menu with a lot of buttons on your right side, and now you have the code, the builder, and everything else like a second line. There's going to be the third line, and it's too many, and users get scared of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's good to hear. Diego in particular is focused on query builders right now, so I'm sure he's taking notes. So
no, thank you for that.
yeah, and then we also are starting to look at, so this is like extreme future state, but some of the future work that we're also looking at are ways of making, for example, panel edit as a whole a little bit more understandable, because right now we have that right-hand pane with all of the options in the world. And so that's definitely on, you know, coming in the next, you know, we're very, very early stage on that because there's a lot to think about there. But, you know, definitely looking to improve the experience there overall as well. So.
Okay, I agree. I mean, sometimes when you build the custom plugins, all users want all kind of parade of these options, and it's great will be too. I mean, you have a sections, right? So you can hide different sections, but still, I mean, it's so many of them, so it will be a better way to organize it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at this point, I think if Grafana were like a Swiss Army knife, it would be too heavy to carry, right? Because it does all the things. So that's what we need to figure out is what are the most important things. So. And that's where, you know, it's really interesting because as a UX team, we have been scaling up two different, so we have, you know, UX sort of like designing applications, but then we've also been scaling up our research capabilities and then also our design system capabilities. So we actually have people who now are dedicated to just learning more about how people are using things and what people want to do. And then we have another team that's dedicated to really making our components much more consistent and understandable and useful and interactive. And we're really hoping that that will help us with the experience overall as well. So we're pretty excited about that as a UX team. So.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any plans to have a visual components to disable explore alerts instead of using environment variables?
You mean just to like show and hide them from like at an organization level? Yeah, that's
from the side menu.
Yeah, that's future state of navigation. Yes, we have to figure out, one of the hardest things is figuring out like at what level should we allow it. And what I've been thinking about is that it might follow the model of the time zones. So if you look at time zones, you can set a time zone at like a per user level. So like I, Amy, can set it to my time zone, or I can set it at an organization level. Or I can set it as like an overall Grafana instance level. And I think that that's probably how we'll have the sort of show and hide things on the navigation, but there's some technical figuring out going on there as well. That's further down the sort of road with the navigation, but that's definitely something that we've heard that people want to do.
Okay, because I mean, you're a UX team and you care about all these buttons, right? And the menus. But I mean, the environment variables, it's the same story. There are so many of them, and you as a developer, you kind of create a Docker file. You put 20 of them, the way how your application behave, right? Right. And so it should be a better way.
Yep. Agree. Yeah, we definitely would like to make that available through the UI. Because you shouldn't have to, and the other thing that would do if we make it available through the UI is it makes it much easier for our cloud users to be able to make those changes as well. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, this is a question for Michael. So what I'm hearing is that you're saying give the options, right? Implement them, but if I don't need them, let me hide them, right? Is that what you're saying? So whatever we're implementing, make sure that we don't overwhelm the user that doesn't need it. So whatever we increase, make sure that you can also collapse it, probably.
Yes, and I mean, there is like extreme cases with some clients who just use a Grafana as the interface, and they use and they use the application plugin as the base application, right? So they don't need explorers, they don't need alerts, they don't need all kind of functionality what you have on your dashboard at the beginning. So you kind of now with the new features, you can disable it with environment variables. But what if at some point some customer wants to have a explorer, right? And it's disabled with environment variables. There is no way you can do it unless you create another build at this moment. So if it's great if you can create the application, right, and provision the users, the main user for the customer, for example, to disable it for them, like Amy said, right? But as a whole organization will have it available, will be a great option.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, good discussion. Anything else we want to talk about today before we call it good?
What do you plan for Grafana 10?
I think we're still figuring that out. Definitely everything you've seen here plus more.
Okay.
But yeah, we're absolutely in planning for all of the above. Like I mentioned, we're kind of rethinking the sort of core dashboard creation experience. Want to make that easier because it has grown in a lot of complexity. And then also, some other good tidbits for ease of use. Ease of use is a big theme for us this year. And so, as UXs, we're pretty excited about that also because that's what we like to do. So, but no firm plans right now that I can necessarily mention because we are still in planning. So,
but there should be some big feature, right? Everybody should be excited about.
We'll see. I think there's sort of differing philosophies on sort of having major release large items versus having releases be a little bit kind of like rolling up to larger releases. I think this is something that developers can talk about, maybe like over friendly drinks together. Like, is it better to do one big splash or is it better to increment releases at a time? And that's something that we're working out as a development organization as well, especially as we're looking at, kind of continuous integration pipelines and things like that. But now I'm stepping on the very edge of my technical knowledge as a UX, not as a developer. So I would definitely, if you see any of the community calls come by that are so sort of like our release teams or any of our like backend development teams, I think these are great questions for them as well.
Okay. No, I see the value with rolling updates, especially because we have an integration and we update the release as soon as possible, like in a week or two after it's actually official done. And there is like not a lot of breaking changes happening, right? And if there is happening, it's not like, oh, now we upgraded to 9.10. Nothing changed, kind of. Nothing breaking happened, right? So it's I like this kind of upgrade, but still, it's a Grafana 10.
I know.
I
know it's like 10, like you wanted to, maybe we'll just rename it and that'll take the pressure off,
Just keep it, Grafana 11.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
So, yeah, well, thanks so much for attending. And, as we mentioned, we're all on community Slack. So reach out if you have any further questions. So otherwise, have a great day, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.